Aetherdrift has just dropped us the newest spoiler. And yeah, it's a Lotus, but is it really what players need? In today's video, that's what we're going to talk about, so stick around. What comes to mind when you hear the word Lotus in Magic the Gathering? Well, of course, any player, even a new player, has probably heard the term Black Lotus, Power 9. Even if they haven't actually researched all the cards, they are well aware that they are powerful, but guess what? So is Wizards of the Coast. Welcome back, everyone. MTG Moxman here. Thanks again for hanging out. So, what are we talking about? Well, Aetherdrift, they announced when Morrow did his little teaser of list of cards, he said, hey, there's a Lotus in here. Now, that's nothing new. We all know this. We've seen Lotuses before from Wizards of the Coast, and they haven't always worked out, have they? A few pretty fun cards to use, and I'm not saying this isn't going to be fun, but is it going to be practical? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. Let's take a look first at the card in question. What you see before you is the Radiant Lotus, and I'm sure 95% of the people watching this video have already taken a look at this card. Radiant Lotus is a 6 casting cost card. It's an artifact, and it says sacrifice one or more artifacts. Choose a color. Target player adds 3 mana of the chosen color for each artifact that was sacrificed this way. So if we take a moment and think about this card, yeah, it has a heavy casting cost of 6. It's not 0 like the original Black Lotus, but this Lotus costs you 6 to get out. And what does it give us? Well, number one, it's not legendary. It isn't restricted. You could technically have 4. That's interesting. It says sacrifice one or more artifacts, which means you could sacrifice a whole slew of them. And for every one you sacrifice, you're going to get 3 mana of the chosen color. Okay, so if we play our cards right, I guess we get a massive heap of mana to do something crazy with. And on paper, this looks pretty good, actually, right? There's a little bit of a maybe this is okay, and maybe this isn't going to be bad, and maybe this isn't going to get me slaughtered if I put this in my deck. So now let's take a look at a few other things here, because there's been other Lotuses. This is the Nyx Lotus, of course, right? We saw this, what, Theros Beyond Death? And if you take a look at the Nyx Lotus as a 4 casting cost, it enters the battlefield tapped. But you choose a color and add an amount of mana equal to your devotion to that color. So how many permanents you have of the chosen color. So the Nyx Lotus could be good. Again, it's got to be situational based on what you're playing. And it's almost like you have to build around it. Okay, so there's our Nyx Lotus. Now, how about something like the Timeless Lotus? Now, anyone on my channel understands that this is by far one of the cards that I just hate this thing. And I hate it with a passion. So the Timeless Lotus costs 5. It comes into the battlefield tapped, and it adds 1 of each color to your mana pool. To me, this is not a Lotus because it's not a singular color, and it's not 3. That's a personal pet peeve of mine, but that hasn't stopped me from using this in Standard, okay? I have used this in multiple decks. I'm not fond of the card, though, and it's kind of a big thing that people tease me about. Anyone who knows me knows I hate this card. But again, 5 to get out. A heavier casting cost, but it does give you 5 mana. And there are ways, just like with other things, including the Radiant Lotus, there'll be other ways of getting these cards out and making them untap or making their abilities more functional. You've just got to build with it. So let's continue down this road here. If we take a look at something that's not a Lotus, but reminds us because it's a Lotus petal. This card was epic and still is. 0 casting cost, it gives you 1 mana. It's a petal from a Black Lotus, basically is what they're kind of hinting. And I love the artwork of the Kaladesh one, so I'm putting it in the video today. And you look at this, and it'd be gone. It's in, it's out, it's history. Unless you have ways of bringing it back and all kinds of crazy stuff. But either way, it's a 0 casting cost. This appeals to a lot of players. And because we've had cards like this, whenever we hear the word Lotus, the nostalgia kicks in. Players start talking. A lot goes on when they announce these kinds of cards. Now, if we take a look at the next one here, the Lotus Ring. This is very recent, right? This is Outlaws of Thunder Junction. This is the special set that didn't happen. It looks like the Star Trek Enterprise. I guess it's better than a race flag. And it's a 3 casting cost, which is interesting because, the original Black Lotus, tap for 3. It has Indestructible. An equipped creature gets +3/+3. It has Vigilance. Sacrifice this creature to add 3 mana to your mana pool. But you have to pay 3 to do it. So really, again, depending on what you're doing and how you're doing it, this really isn't the best either. And I've tried to use this a few times. It has never won me a game. Okay. The Lotus Ring itself, the idea I think is kind of cool, but it's never won me a standard game. Now, of course, many of these cards will find homes in Commander. I'm well aware, and so are you. Now, how about Jeweled Lotus? Why, Moxman, you say? Did you forget that this was banned? Did you forget we can't play with this? But let's look at the card anyway. I know, I know, I know what people are thinking in the background. Shouldn't be banned. I know. 0 casting cost. Sacrifice the Jeweled Lotus. Add 3 mana of any one color. Spend it only to play your commander. Okay, it's limited. It's functional. It does a singular thing, and it does take up a card inside of your commander deck. And not every deck had to have this either, by the way. It depends on what you're playing. This card I still don't think should be banned, but this feels more like a Lotus. That's why it was a $100 card. It had a lot of attention drawn to it, a lot of players thinking about this card. We were kind of in tune with the idea of this. And when Commander Legends came out, this was a really big deal to crack one of these, and they were really hard to get. Now, let's take a look here at the Gilded Lotus. This is a 5 casting cost, doesn't come into play tapped, and you get to add 3 mana of any one color. Here in Foundations, there you go, it's in Standard already. When you look at cards like this again has a better feel for a lot of players because, yeah, it costs you 5, but you're going to get 3 back right away. It's not coming into play tapped. So you're investing 5, but on the same turn, you can get 3 of that mana kind of given back to you, almost like the Urza Saga spells, where you'd pay 7, but you get to untap 7 land. This gives you some kind of rate of return right away, which is why it's always been a kind of desirable card. Now, if we compare this, of course, to the original Black Lotus, this 0 casting cost beast of a card that says sacrifice the Black Lotus, add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. Guys, this is what everything is based on. Okay, this is the gold standard that every other Lotus is being compared against. And I honestly think the closest we've gotten is Jeweled Lotus, if you're breaking down the actual concept of the card, if not all the mechanics, because it can only be played in Commander, and right now it's banned, but the actual idea of the card is the closest Wizards of the Coast has ever gotten to truly producing a card like this. Now, where does that leave us, though? If this is the best we've got, and now we've got a Radiant Lotus, well, how is that going to work for us? As soon as this spoiler dropped, and everyone started looking at it, every single person out there was doing the same thing. Can we break this card? Can this work in a way that is going to be advantageous to me? What cards do I need to really hook this card up and make it work fluidly? So there's going to be a seamless transition to what I want to do, tap into the power supply, what this card can give me, and how am I going to get there? Because remember, it's very specific. It costs 6 to get out, unless you can cheat it out. You also have to have a whole bunch of artifacts to sacrifice to this thing to pump out tons of mana to do whatever you're going to do. That's a lot of steps. It's not like it's just, one thing. It's multiple things that have to happen in a certain order to make this go off. But is there possibilities? Are there things that players are going to do? Well, yes, there absolutely are. I'm going to share a couple of them with you right now. Now, before I share some cards here with you, I want to remind you guys, the Radiant Lotus just got dropped. We don't know what synergy is coming down the pipeline from future sets like Dragonstorm, Final Fantasy, or even Marvel. You got to keep that stuff in mind, that although a card can look weak now, it could have a major payback later on. So when we're looking at this card, let's not forget that there are lots of ways of bringing things back around. If you do happen to get a lot of artifacts on the battlefield, permanent artifacts, not temporary things like a treasure token, something like Brilliant Restoration, where it says return all artifact and enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, can be a huge lending hand. It's not something you want to ignore. But if you're looking into something like Standard, you're also going to think of things like the Awakening, which lets you get like a single card, right? Return target artifact or non-aura enchantment from your graveyard. If it's a creature, it gets +1/+1 counters. But if you're sacking it, you really don't care about that. But still, the idea of bringing things back, depending on how you're doing it and why, there could be some gameplay there. Now, when we're looking at older cards, things like Academy Ruins, which, by the way, I love this artwork. That's why I'm showing you this one. Put target artifact card from your graveyard on top of your library. Now, let's not forget that certain artifacts trigger, and when they go into play, they create multiple versions of themselves, token copies that are artifacts in addition to other things. So bringing back one artifact that creates 3 can be a very cost-effective way to getting a lot of mana out of the Radiant Lotus every single turn, depending on how you're using it. Cards like the Academy Runes are going to help you get there. Now, if we're looking at cards like Treasure Vault from Dungeons and Dragons, when you look at this, sacrifice the Treasure Vault and create X treasure tokens. Yeah, you're paying 2 for 1 because it's double X, right? But at the same time, there are ways to make this work. Even sacrificing a few limited tokens to give you enough mana to ramp into the Treasure Vault to get a multiple larger form of tokens, okay? And then let's not forget, you can always bring the Treasure Vault back. It doesn't have to be a singular. There are all kinds of cards now that let you go back into your graveyard to get cards like this. Players are going to be looking at these options. Now, simplistic terms, sure. Crackle with Power. 2 red, triple X. Triple X. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. This thing will blow people away if you can get your mana ramped up, and people are looking at ways of using cards like this. I love the potential of cards to see what you can do, but they're not always going to work out, and you have to kind of play test it and see what works. Old Gnawbone. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, create that many treasure tokens. See what I mean? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. That's a pretty good card, pretty good combination, right? Stuff can happen there. But we also can't forget things like the Bootlegger Stash, which says lands you control have tap to create a treasure token. Yes, this isn't in standard, but it doesn't matter. People playing with decks will find ways to ramp up mana and make this work for them, and that's the whole point. So now that I've shown you guys just a quick glance of some of the cards that could work with the Radiant Lotus, it makes you wonder who's going to do it first. Who's going to come up with the idea that everyone else mimics and follows along with to see if it comes to be a winning combination card. I look at that card, and to me it seems like it's destined for Commander. I can't see the purpose for it in Standard yet. It doesn't mean I'm going to give up, and maybe some of you guys will have some comments you'll put down in the comments section. That's great. I love getting educated here on the channel. But these were off the top of my head, and most of them point to a Commander game that's going to go mid-range. You're going to get some major crazy amount of mana and do something that's just going to shock your entire pod. That's how I see it breaking down, but that isn't always the case. The funny thing is, I don't hate this Lotus. I hate the casting cost of 6. That seems like a heavy investment, and that's what it's supposed to do, because the payoff is so big when you get 3 mana for each artifact you sacrifice, and with so many options of sacrificing artifacts, we have possibilities here. So I don't hate it as much as the Timeless Lotus. I don't hate it as much. It's better than Nyx's Lotus to me. So with this one here, you still have to build around it. You still have to think about what you're doing. But I'm not going to give this one a failing grade yet. I would love to see what other people think. I'm going to keep my mind open. Unlike other Lotuses that I just want to plow into the ground, this is not one of them. I'm not that fond of the artwork, to be honest. I think they could have done a better job. It's not my favorite art or anything. But you know what? That can change year over year. So what do you guys think of this card? Drop some comments in the comment section. Share that with everyone. And thanks again for hanging out with me on my channel today. I'll see you guys tomorrow with another video. Maybe some more cool spoilers coming up. You never know what they're going to give us from Aetherdrift. But don't forget, after this, we got Dragonstorm and Final Fantasy. And people are already putting money together to buy Final Fantasy as soon as the pre-orders go up. We will talk about that in a future video. The numbers are going to get scary. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to the fantastic patrons of my channel. Because of the amazing patrons here, daily uploaded content is made possible for everyone to enjoy. And maybe I'll slip in some Ramble Jambles, maybe a little G.I. Joe, Thundercats, and maybe even Dragon Ball Z. Who knows? We don't know what's going to be there till we get to the end of the video, but the patrons are the ones who make that possible, so thanks again. Okay, we're here at the end. I'm staring at it. I still don't like the artwork. I don't know. It almost feels like a cheap knockoff of the Neverending Story, or a nicer version of the Dark Crystal. But I'm looking at it, and I don't hate it as much as other Lotuses, but I still think it's going to take a whole lot to make it really work. And that bothers me. And why it bothers me is because of the pace that Wizards of the Coast has set for the game. Cards like this don't really get played in Standard, at least I don't think they will. I could be wrong. You can prove me wrong. Show it to me. I look at that card right now. I'm thinking, how would it get used where can I use it, and in what situation would I want to use it when there's not a better option available. If there's a better option, I'm never going to look at this card. And it's mythic, so where is it going? And I hate that checkered flag. Can I tell you guys that? I hate it. I hate it. As an icon to design the thing, I'm sorry, it doesn't ring true for me, and I'm allowed to hate it. I don't have to like it. I don't hate the card. I don't hate it. I'm just wondering how it's going to work. Guys, this is the Ramble Jamble. These are the things I think about. Hating race flags, looking at the never-ending story on my screen right now. For some reason, it just reminds me of that, the princess or whatever, and her little golden tower thing. Not Falcor. That guy's awesome. Let's remember. Yeah, I got nothing else. I don't think. Maybe. No, probably not. All right. Have a great one.